person you're calling is on another line. Just leave your message after the tone, and when you're done, press hash or just hang up.
There's an EP that I've been kind of obsessed with ever since I first heard it, that being Hey World by King Krule, which is around 16 minutes and comprised of 4 alternate renditions of songs from his third album, Man Alive, that would release a year after this. And before talking about Hey World, I feel it's important to touch on Man Alive for a second. King Krule is really no stranger to having albums with not one particular sound, but Man Alive feels like the extremes of everything he's done so far. It feels almost like it doesn't even know what to do with itself throughout its runtime, and is constantly at odds with itself. One song is really melancholic and soft, while the next is pure mud. Whatever tender and melancholic guitar ballad can be swept away in favor of something that sounds like it's barely held together. Man Alive has probably the muddiest songs he's ever made, with something like Perfecto Miserable that has this chokehold onto some distant, sinister energy within his vocals and instrumentation. I think like every single note hit on this album is like on the first 3 octaves, especially in his vocals. They're often manipulated in pitch on a good number of tracks, and if his vocals aren't, whatever vocal sample looping in the background definitely is. It gives a good number of tracks this kind of distant feeling that's honestly a little comforting. Even though it does sound a bit goopy at times, I still think it's really good at creating more somber moods through its really lethargic and sparse instrumentation. And this album captures pure desperation really well, especially in the vocals. Like, they're some of my favorite performances of his ever. This general tone also makes the occasionally bright and optimistic moment really special, like Theme for the Cross, which despite having the same kind of jaded vocal performance, just has this beautiful instrumental that completely cancels out any dull feeling the song could have conveyed. All in all, it's a pretty neat album, I'd say. It's not really the most like out-of-the-box, crazy, avant-garde thing. Like, it's a little strange, but not that crazy. But it's definitely the furthest thing from intimate King Krule has made, and that kind of makes the renditions on Hey World even more interesting. Perfecto Miserable, which once was pretty uncomfortable, is now so humble and sweet, with Archie's soft vocals and guitar wrapping around you like a blanket, assuring you that you'll be safe. His performance and low-fidelity recording make it so emotional and warm, and never fails to console me and make me feel loved. Listening to Hey World, I can't help but envision myself right next to him, like he's someone I've known for my entire life. I feel so comfortable listening to his voice, and I end up feeling a really strong connection to it. The film that went along with this EP makes it all the more sweet to me, with the grainy and static recordings of just him playing in some pretty location, adding this quaint yet bittersweet nostalgia to everything. Like I'm looking back on past memories with a friend by watching the old videos we made together or something of the sorts. And that feeling, that intimacy, is something I've gravitated a lot more towards in the art, and more specifically the music I indulge in. A genre I'm not well versed in at all, but one that really intrigues me is field and nature recordings. This music that's birthed out of your pure fascination and love for the sounds of your environment, and desire to have your music be so in touch with nature and the pure noise it creates. Just feels really sweet to me. Lots of times field recording gets mixed in with ambient music, and that's when shit starts getting crazy. I'm gonna talk about another one later, but something like the Decrescendo by was sort of my first exposure to a full field recordings album, and it's wonderfully serene and intimate, living these short little bursts of time together just listening to these sounds that both of us find so much comfort and serenity in. The album that uses field recordings in a way I really like is Zero by Ichiko Aoba, the 4th song in specific. It's around 11 minutes of sparse guitar playing and vocals mixed in with sounds of wind, footsteps, and birds. It ends up creating a very vivid picture for the listener. I can envision where we are and who I'm with and everything around me so easily. It's beautiful, and how stripped back it is just makes it feel even more down to earth. Similar to Hey World, I have a really strong attachment to this song. I feel like I'm being embraced in a warm hug by her. It's so close and personal. Our interaction is quiet and we don't exchange many words, but it feels like we're both there for each other somehow. At one point all the music stops and all we can hear is the sound of wind and birds, giving this small moment of silence between the two of us. One to just purely exist in without any worries or something to demand your attention. The rest of this album, as well as Ichiko Aoba's discography as a whole, is really keen on evoking these emotions, at least to me. Her music is very earthy and human, and every word from her mouth and every note she plays on the guitar is so much life and love. It all really feels like it's coming from a person who truly cares about me and wants me to know they do. Origami has a few songs that have this quaint and nostalgic energy that remind me of a home I never lived in, but one that welcomes me either way. Windswept at Dawn, while largely being more focused on your relationship with the world it's created and evoking feelings of discovery and wonder, still takes a moment or two to calm down and just let you simply exist with her for a bit, like on Horo or Chinuhachi. And these quiet peace breakers wouldn't be as effective if not for the sprawling landscapes that every other song painted. And Zero is not only my favorite album ever, but one I feel I can go to whenever I need anything. It's helped me calm down if I ever need that. It's made me sappy and gross, and just generally means the world to me. There isn't really anything I can think of that makes me feel as loved as this album does. These two projects I think are the best starting points when describing these feelings for me. They're intimate art in probably the most easily digestible form. Something that feels familiar, that makes me feel loved and like I'm close to somebody simply by virtue of it being soft and soothing. And when I say intimacy, it's not necessarily between me and the artist themselves as a person, but more so some representation of them that's manifested based on how the artist has presented themselves and the sound of their music. With Hey World and Zero being soft and warm, and the artist presenting themselves closely and personally. I don't mean for this to come off parasocially, I obviously don't actually know the artist. It's just their music provides an outlet for me to feel like I'm close to somebody that I connect with through listening to the music. Just creating connections and attachments to the little people I envision listening to something. That's kind of the whole deal. If you asked me to pick out albums that genuinely break my heart to no end, Cats in the Cold would be one of the first albums I mention. It's a very simple album, but it never fails to seep deep under my skin and crawl around inside me like a little bug. Almost all songs follow a pretty similar template: guitar chords, woodwind, soft synth lead, and vocals, with each part of it made out to be so quiet and small, giving the album this fragile and lightweight quality. It's delicate, an auditory portrayal of a leaf almost, as it gently sways in the breeze before perching onto the ground. The synth leads don't usually follow a set melody, they more so just slide up and down throughout the whole song or parts of one, giving each track almost this woozy, sleepy feeling. A friend of mine described it as feeling really alien-like, like less in a spooky alien way and more a cute, silly alien way, and I honestly love that description. It's such a charming way to think about it. The guitar playing is subtle, and its gentleness lends its hand in making the album feel almost like a lullaby, and alongside her vocals, which sound so close to a point where it feels like she's right next to you, the album ends up being extremely comforting and soothing. One song, Fairy Seeds, is the only one on the album to feature any kind of percussion, and the drums used sound really similar to the ones on a drum machine that came a part of an old MIDI keyboard I own and used to play with all the time. Each little synth and flute preset also sounds reminiscent of presets that would be available on one of these dainty keyboards. This, alongside the general lo-fi sound and cover, add this ineffable sense of childhood and nostalgia to the album. Each song kinda sounding like a cute kid's show or odd commercial you would see when you were younger, one that was muted and had really bleak energy to it, and it's kinda stuck with you as you grew up, becoming this faded memory that, whether it even happened or not, is indiscernible to you. I can envision the very amateur paper cutout animation shittily displayed on a TV that you never remember owning, on a channel that you never learn the name of, in a house that you feel you've never lived in before. I like to imagine the characters on the cover are those in the show and they all care for each other and watch the stars together. There isn't really one specific lyrical theme encompassing the whole album. It covers feelings of loneliness, loss, not being enough, anxiety, and trauma, and it does so in such an honest and heart-wrenching way, as her vocals give the impression she's holding back tears. She does this thing on a few songs where she relates herself or another person to an animal, like on the title track and Vampire Bat. And it should be pretty obvious why analogies or metaphors relating to animals is something to identify with or personify as like that get to me. Vampire Bat in specific, my personal favorite song on the album sound-wise, is the first time on the album she mentions an unnamed person who had abused or hurt her before, personifying that person as a bat. On the title track, she wishes to become a stray cat out in the cold, because despite the rough conditions, she'd be more free out there, and wouldn't be at the will of her depression and social anxiety. The lyrics on these two songs in specific come across so real to me. They give off kind of a journal or diary vibe in the way they're written. I love how she uses more cozy and innocent aesthetics as a way to describe and understand her emotions. It makes for such a real and comforting album. When she isn't using animals to describe her emotions, she's just saying everything out as it is, very forwardly, with zero sugarcoating. On this album are songs about growing up, unsure of what she'll do after she's done with school, and not being able to connect with people anymore. With all that said, it should probably be falling into view why this thing means as much to me as it does. Alongside covering stuff I can personally relate to as someone likely a similar age to her at the time she made this album, in a similar vein to Hey World, feels like something that was made by somebody I could have known. I can clearly envision myself with somebody as I listen. It feels so close and personal. Maybe I'm even helping out with it given the connection I have with its production. And that all makes the honesty and way she pours out everything in front of you with its lyrics really fuck me up. I don't know if intimate would be exactly the right word, but it feels like I'm hugging somebody while we both cry. Two stray cats huddled in the cold together. Mage Tears also has had a really big influence on the aesthetics of some of my own art. The quietness and fragility to it is something I find really captivating, and I hope I get that vibe across even a little bit as amazingly as she does. Also, I would like to add on top of this that I recently listened to her EP Bears Lullabies, and I have to say it's like maybe even a bit beyond Cats in the Cold in regards to intimacy. So basically everything I said about Cats in the Cold applies to Bears Lullabies as well, but to a bit higher degree. An album that gives very similar feelings to Cats in the Cold is Loren Connor's 40-minute improvisational ambient piece, Airs, made up entirely of short little washes of just his reverberated electric guitar. Similarly to Cats in the Cold, it's very simplistic, more so than Cats in the Cold. And despite that simplicity, it's also one of the most heartbreaking albums I can think of. It's overwhelmingly lonely. Each time his guitar is struck, the notes ring out almost endlessly, never reaching any destination. And its sparsity leaves so much space for them to just linger and wash around in your head. The whole album has a really spacey atmosphere to it. The guitar tone is twinkly and sounds like the noises I imagine the stars and constellations would make. The last song is the only one with an actual name, that being The Death of Shelley. And in just 4 words, the album kind of says all it really needed to. Even without that one name, it's still so easy to feel the loss and pain that was diffused into each passage of this album. I can envision the solemn, lonely man on his porch, next to houses with no people, playing melodies that nobody will hear, that just drift off into space. Despite its simplicity, it still opens the door for so much imagery, partly in favor due to its cover, which I absolutely love. It's quiet yet evocative, which really captures the sound of the album in visual form, and paints a very nice picture to act as almost a setting for itself in the process. I don't know, maybe this seems silly, but even without that, this album is still really beautiful, and I really recommend giving it a listen if you need something comforting or if you need to calm down. I think everyone should hear what Loren has to say, not with words, but with his guitar. I'm extremely gushy for folk music, so a majority of it I listen to I end up loving, and lots of it falls into this whole category for me. Some small ones I want to just offhandedly mention are Seven Swans by Sufjan Stevens, which is very similar to Zero for me, Dog Cat Mass Infinity by Armadillo Petting Zoo, which perfectly mixes rough and animalistic feelings with tenderness and love into a beautifully emotional 40-minute epic that makes me feel like I'm howling under the moonlit sky alongside the 2 vocalists. It appeals to every primal emotion within me, and it's just some of the most validating music I've ever listened to. I went over it a bit in my 2024 end of year video, but to keep pushing this agenda I have going, this album is so good. It's from such a small artist. They deserve way more love. So please listen to it. I would appreciate that a lot. And finally, Michigan, also by Sufjan Stevens, because it's cozy and sounds like Christmas. But I don't really want to push the idea that to be intimate in my eyes is just to be folk or simple. There's a few examples I can think of albums outside of folk that feel like this for me, which I will go over soon, as well as examples of albums in the folk genre that don't fill this niche for me. The biggest example is Grouper, whose music either feels more like I'm surrounded by people I love who can't see me or touch me, and I can't talk to them at all, or like I'm unconscious, being lifted and carried by a large, unidentifiable creature. I even wrote a haiku about how Alien Observer makes me feel one time. How neat! But with all that being said, I think for the remainder, I want to focus on more interesting examples of art that makes me feel this way. Stuff outside of music some people would consider authentic, more specifically electronic and more experimental music. For this next example, I'm gonna set the scene a little bit. It was sometime in summer 2024, and to put it simply, I was kind of miserable. I'd prefer not to talk about it, but a lot of emotions were going through my head, and I was very bleh. I laid in bed for practically the entire day, and was also completely alone in my house for a portion of it. That being really the only part of the day I even remember clearly. In that time, I was trying to find new music because I didn't have anything better to do. And in my searching, I stumbled across the genre of ambient noise wall. Out of curiosity, I decided to check out a bit of one of the more popular albums in the genre, Levigoo by Shum, and I ended up listening to the entire thing without ever feeling the need to turn it off. Each song on this album follows a pretty similar formula. There's a wall of soft noise layered on top of quiet ambient pads and sounds. Mostly nature sounds. But there was something about this album that really affected me. It was one of the most comforting experiences I'd ever had with music. The pure wall of static that this album was enough for me as I rotted in bed doing nothing. It's like the noise itself had manifested into a living entity, one with thoughts and feelings, one that if you listened close enough you could hear it breathing. In my first listen to this, it really felt like there was something there for me. Not necessarily the artists themselves or a person I can envision while listening, but just pure audio, some physical manifestation of noise. The album is also just beautiful, and the textures presented on each song are as comforting as they are brain-tickling. It perfectly combines sharpness and softness to make some really accessible and easy-listening noise music, and it does so in a way that's so raw and genuine, intermixing sounds of nature so beautifully into itself, further pushing how grounded and real the album feels, despite how unnatural or inauthentic it would seem on the surface. I don't think this is a cushiony album like Hey World and Zero are for me. It's very rough and bittersweet, but I think that makes it work even better. Two disheveled dogs huddling together for warmth, and that's kind of beautiful. The first song is the only one without any noise wall. Instead, it builds this ecosystem in your head with subtle ambience that breathes in and out, birds chirping, and the soft auditory textures of rocks colliding with and shifting around each other, water dripping, and fire crackling. It's otherworldly while still staying grounded and feeling familiar, and even in its loneliness I still feel extremely comforted and like I'm being held in something's arms. That something again just being sound. Songs continue this sort of world building with each noise wall feeling like it's coming from something within this environment, like tracks 3 and 4 which sound like an open fire or fast winds, or tracks 2 and 6 which sound like buzzing machinery and running generators, or track 5 which feels like rocks scraping against the floor. But within all that noise is something so tender and beautiful. I never thought music like this could feel so human, so loving. Levigo has helped a lot and is very important to me, both for what it does to me now, as well as what it did for me the day I first listened to it. In one of the loneliest and most exhausting periods of my life, I had this thing for me, and I'll never stop loving it for that. I've tried some other music described as noisy but comforting, and have looked through other albums in the ambient noise wall genre, but nothing else has really spoken to me in the same way that this did. Not that they were bad, but just nothing else felt as alive as this did, I guess. And honestly, I think that was the best outcome. I'm glad this thing is one of a kind. It's so uniquely beautiful and personal. I really wouldn't want any other album to be like it. Okay, let's talk about Violet Pony now. If you don't know who Violet Pony is, it's an electronic pop artist who's based its entire artistic identity and aesthetics around My Little Pony, and it's the best shit ever. To me, she's kind of the embodiment of that whole being cringe yet sincere thing, even though I don't think its interests in art are cringe at all, but like, you know what I mean. Going through everything that Violet Pony has made or has been made for her is truly beautiful. It's such a big basket of trinkets and goodies to be tasted. It's kind of like a whole new sub-community of bronies she's cultivated with all its new characters and whatnot, and whenever I see any art of Flet Gershai, their name is so hard to say, I'm sorry, I turn into the fucking Flights Reacts gif. She's like the biggest concept albumer I've ever seen in my life. It has like books and shit for all her albums. I did not read all that, but this is like an insane amount of elbow grease put into something, holy shit. And her forays into concept albums are really fun in ways I'll talk about in 5 minutes, but to me I think lyrically she shines the most in her more personal projects like Cutie Marks, which is like peak Howling Against the Moon backdrop music at times. Girls Who Are Wizards is also a notable mention. I feel like dubstep is kind of having a bit of a nostalgic resurgence, like the reception to the Skrillex album from this year comes to mind instantly, and Girls Who Are Wizards is like the pinnacle of that for me. It is full of stupid and funny and on-brand over-the-top EDM music, and then it all ends on probably the most heartfelt song she's ever made, while still being EDM, and it works so well coming right after all the unserious but still genuine and sincere bro-step shit. I have a decent attachment to dubstep and EDM from when I was just a baby bunny, and it's maybe one of the genres I can get the most sappy and gross to. Comet by Sufjan makes me scream and cry. Go listen to it, it's really good. And this shit is so awesome to me, I love it. There's something a little bit immature about dubstep you could say, and I don't really mean that in a bad way. Like, it's gimmicky and loud and kind of obnoxious at times, but that makes it all the more impactful as a genre when it comes to making more emotional music given its whole attitude and sentimentality and history. And Girls Who Are Wizards is kind of the epitome of that. All my homies hate Skrillex? Hell no. All my homies love Skrillex. Violet Pony is just very representative of what it's like to be online, I think. Her music kind of embodies growing up using the internet, making friends with and talking to people you've never seen a picture of, getting enveloped in random browser games for cartoons you like, and role-playing as a badass pony. A kind of aesthetic she fully embraces herself sometimes in her music, like on Antonym. Violet's sincerity and honesty in its music that at times is extremely self-indulgent and fun, and other times is genuinely heartfelt and beautiful, makes its music so intimate for me. The kind of completely unapologetic music that inspires me to stop giving shits about everything and be my little bunny pony self, and stop caring about formalities or coming across like I know everything or liking shit that people will find corny. Who even cares anymore? And above all else, her music sounds seriously badass and awesome. Violet Pony, you're kinda just the realest one out there. I fuck with you heavy, my little pony. Stole that shit from Luna Game 3D, by the way. I couldn't have to get it. Going beyond the music itself though, it's genuinely so refreshing to see someone who isn't afraid to show off how much they love their own art. She has cataloged, rated, and reviewed almost every single release of hers on RYM, which sounds like such a nothing thing to point out. But it's not really every day you see an artist publicly rate basically everything they've made a perfect score. Amongst her serious music projects, it's just pure mush, and even if we don't share super similar sense of humor, I still love this, and it's low-key what I'm trying to go for whenever I upload if Paper Mario was realistic. There's also this other thing I want to talk about that I've been thinking about for a bit, and to explain it better, I'm going to bring up this album cover by Archives 2 by Star67. I think about this album a lot, not only because it's kind of a shocking and silly cover for an album, especially for one that sounds like this.
Read the fucking clip now.
But it's also really emblematic of like edgy, emo, Newgrounds art made by kids who are growing up. Like, as you get older, you get more angsty and emotional, I guess, but there's still a part of you that wants to continue holding on to the things you grew up with, or maybe are still growing up with. Even adults do this kind of thing too. And it's kind of beautiful to me for some reason, and this cover really well encapsulates that whole phenomenon for me. Taking something you know and transforming it into this new context that fits your current emotional state. Maybe I can cope with my crippling alcoholism if I know Rarity's going through that shit too, you know? And that's kind of what Violet Pony's music is all about. Its music never really uses actual characters from MLP often, but everything surrounding the music, the characters, settings, and lore, it's all based around MLP, and it's just been spun continuously by her into its own new thing that's uniquely hers. Yet it never strays so far to where you can't tell what influenced it. I think more derivative art is severely undervalued by a majority of people online. This shit rocks to me, even stuff that doesn't go as far as Violet does for her Loren music. I love seeing people who aren't afraid to wear influences on their sleeves and incorporate what they love into their own art. It's so beautiful and human to me. I've been thinking about this for a while now, and can I just say that seeing Mara, the writer and YouTuber I look up to probably the most out of anybody, say something very similar in their video on the second Haunted PS1 demo disc compilation was probably the most vindicating thing I've ever witnessed.
There's definitely gonna be some fuckboys out there who will complain about how blatant the inspirations are, but I don't cop with that nonsense. It's something to be proud of, and honestly, the execution is so clean that it feels just like a minor nitpick by a bunch of killjoys. There is nothing cooler than being able to pinpoint one's personal inspiration, and just see how that reflects to their work, video games especially. It's a good way to gauge what sort of idea resonates with each artist, what concept they vibe with, and I don't know. It adds this almost deeper personal connection to their work. At least that's the way I choose to see it.
So that's the majority of the music I felt like mentioning, but what about my other area of expertise? Games. Well, like kinda, like a little bit. It's a lot harder to pin down games that feel like this because music is inherently a more personal art form that leaves much more up to the imagination of the listener as compared to something like a game. And in turn, music lets my mind run a little wilder. And also, what makes it difficult is that games aren't necessarily about the author all the time, while music a majority of the time is. Games usually have characters. What the fuck? Ew. Which brings the question: does really strong personal attachment to a character count? Because if so, then One Shot is a pretty good example. I probably never cared more about a character in a game until I played One Shot, and that's because of how much you interact with Nico, not as a character, but as yourself. I guess that's a pretty decent example then because of how one-on-one the relationship is, and I found myself caring very deeply about the fate and background of this little dickhead. But that's kind of boring to me. And that's why I bring in the thing that every other video I've made under the Conan name has been about. I've already pretty much written about this in my climb video during its final moments, and if anything, that whole video is almost a groundwork to this one. So to summarize, fan content made by people who aren't as talented and don't push the boundaries of modding or creating, and are just some small little thing made by someone online, is one of the most intimate things I can think of, at least in terms of like games. Don't get me wrong, super polished and high quality hacks or mods are great in their own ways. I made a 76-minute video about one of them, but they aren't necessarily grounded, if that makes sense, which isn't a bad thing obviously, but it's not an intimate thing. Something like Kitty Castle connects with me in a way that is solely unique to more amateurish modded content, where it feels like I could have known the person and they're sharing it with me, or at least that's kind of how it feels playing through these. It helps that in a lot of cases you can often get a sense of what the author is like. At the best moments, their personality just oozes out of it all onto the floor, making a big mud puddle. Because the entry point for modded content a lot of the time is very accessible, anyone can make these if they're willing to put some time into it. And even in the smallest hacks, there's so much creativity in life, and I adore them all. This also applies to more accessible game engines as well, like RPG Maker, the biggest one probably. These also are almost never made for monetary gain, so they end up being completely unrestricted copyright-wise, and it leads to the developer being able to do practically whatever they want. And that's awesome, kinda. And that's not really something most other game mediums really allow. It gives the author full and complete creative expression with no real limitations aside from ones tied to the engine. They can add on top of everything the music they like, whatever they find funny, references to whatever they like. It's something truly unique to fan game culture that I adore. Hyper-focusing on being original is fine, but there's something really special about playing fan content that doesn't give a shit if it's unoriginal. There's also the fact that modded content rides on what I said earlier about derivative art, given that modded content is inherently derivative even if it doesn't go include any random copyrighted bullshit. There's something so quaint and lovely about making something that either uses the game itself as a husk or like a template maybe. I mentioned in my B3313 video that I grew up on really amateur FNAF fan games, and while I can't say this is a reason as to why I gravitated towards them then, I can definitely say it's a contributor to why I still love these things now. With fan content, it's hard to really care too much if it's shit, because all of it's kind of beautiful to me, and I love all of it so much. I'm the only person that could come out of an hour-long Breaking the Magic stream and say with a straight face, yeah, that was pretty fun. Going outside of modded content, I absolutely love early 2.0 levels in GD that kind of suck ass but are also like kind of revolutionary. It's a charm and vibe that's completely ineffable to me, and I adore them all. Also, if anyone knows that like this like 3 or 4 star level that's called like candy themed, and I don't know, it's like some generic ass name like Candyland or something, and the only part I remember is when your UFO turns into a cupcake that's made with like the 2.0 cloud object as the icing, and I thought that was the most adorable shit ever. Like, I need to find that again. I have no idea what it is. Help me, please. I played Love Hina Dating Sim a bit ago, and it was the stupidest shit ever, but also probably one of the most fun first playthroughs I've had of any game ever. The needlessly vulgar humor is so silly and adds so much character, and the barely comprehensible character interactions turn it into this pure mush of a video game that I can't help but unconditionally love. Like, I can't stress enough how fun it is to not take anything you're seeing seriously, and just letting yourself go along with the absurd series of events and mind-numbing gameplay as if it's normal. This whole thing doesn't just apply to like fan content and user-made levels though. Just any game that's kinda ass in some way or gives the impression that the creator isn't super familiar and talented with making art, I'll more than likely find really endearing. Also, quick unscripted clarification, but when I say something's ass, I don't mean like I think it's bad. It like, when like compared to standards of people who aren't gay like and stupid like me, would be considered as. I just use that as kind of like a way to say that I'm not calling any of this bad because I love it all. It's human, it's beautiful, it's art, and that's all cheesy and corny, but I feel it's really resonant for me as an artist myself. Seeing stuff that's made by people like me who aren't super art masters or popular or have huge budgets to make stuff, but they do, and it's so great. Like, I love art, guys. Like, it's so cool. Like it's so cool. None of this is in a really ironic way either. Liking things ironically is like being closeted but with opinions. I genuinely have so much love for all this stuff and what it means to me, and I think the amount of value I'm able to find in these is almost like a point of pride for me, and in my opinion a symbol of my maturity. I usually try my hardest to see positives in all the little silly games that live on my computer, and it's very fulfilling to not just care so much about negatives and like make fun of shit that is obviously made by someone who isn't like a super master. Like, who the fuck cares? Like, objective art criticism's stupid and a waste of time and impossible. Like, just put the fries in the bag, bro. Like, obviously there are a lot of things that I don't like them, and it can be good to talk about them, but I don't feel like putting so much attention on that when I can instead be talking about something I actually care about, especially when these videos take me so damn long. I also want to clarify that this isn't me saying stuff with higher budget that's really polished and took years to make are worse or less art. I assume nobody actually thought that's what I was saying, but I thought I'd mention it. I also want to clarify that this is a majority for visual arts, like games, videos, and drawings or whatever. It's kind of a lot harder for music to give me this feeling. The only example I can think of is my own album, Sometimes Silence is Nice, because that album is like low-key actually ass, but also kind of raw as hell. But like, obviously I have a strong and personal connection to my own art, so like that doesn't really count. I just thought I'd mention that. Except that I found out about what Hello Kitty Suicide Club is in the middle of making this video. Okay, I think these guys genuinely like have some talent. They can make some killer MIDI grindcore instrumentals that actually kind of fuck. Just like how they use the awful MIDI distortion and overdrive guitars. It's honestly really neat, and I think what they make is cooler than like the PC Doom game music. It's just they put abysmal dog shit screeches over it, which makes it more often not really funny to me. I don't know, I can't ever see myself taking this shit seriously in any capacity, and I can't even fathom people who genuinely get riled up over it. With a video like this, I feel like a few people will probably look at me a little bit funny. I'm hoping people will understand and maybe even agree with me, but I'm not going to act like this topic is extremely nebulous and solely dependent on personal feelings and imagination. I don't think Shum made Levigu thinking it would be some deeply resonant and human piece of art that some gay dickhead would personify as a living, breathing person that loves me. If you don't get it, that's okay. But I feel like making this video because it's very emblematic of how much art means to me now that I've gotten older and wiser and more senile. It's gotten to a point where I feel this attached to some of the art I love. It goes really beyond something I enjoy and more like another being in my life. It's maybe a tiny bit parasocial, and some could kind of see it as a little sad, but to me, it's kind of beautiful and probably a little healthy for me to have such attachments to the art in my life. It makes me feel a bit more like something, you know, a bit more honest and empathetic, I guess, if that makes sense. I love art, and I love loving art. Throughout my time making videos, I've realized that art to me is more than just something I formulate critique on, and I hope my videos show my mushy love for something completely unrestricted, and I make it abundantly clear how much something means to me or how interesting or cool I think something is. I really value everything I've talked about in this video, and I hope by honing in on this one quality they all share, I really got that across. On top of all this, I really hope that my art in some way can be like this for someone. Not even necessarily in an intimate way, but I hope my shit just connects with you or makes you feel seen. I don't know, I hope you just feel shit watching my videos or listening to my music. At the end of the day, this is kind of just a video about comfort albums or just comfort art in general, and just how I've interpreted the ways they make me feel. And everyone probably interprets comfort like that differently, so I guess that's the message of this whole video. Yeah, that's all. Thanks for listening to me. Bye.